friend.
Hi, friend.
And to the brave hearts listening out there, welcome to Permission to be Human. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Janelle.
Get ready for some real-time relationship woo and wisdom
from the front lines with occasional tantrums and tears
about how breaking rules, blurring boundaries, and tossing tradition can be catalysts for finding your truth.
Let's debunk the fairy tales we were told as children and create a new map for life.
Yes, Disney can go fuck itself.
If you're seeking permission to choose your own path,
freedom is the new F word, people,
and want to feel less alone along the way,
we got you. Please note, this is our side of the story. Our partners and metamors have their own individual experiences, and we do not speak for them.
Good morning, Andrea.
Good morning, Janelle. It's Monday. It's our podcast recording day.
It is, and it's actually a special day. You know why? Because it's
why?
Masturbation Monday.
Oh, yeah, Masturbation Monday. That's my favorite holiday. It's on all my Google calendars.
This is our first annual. It's our first
annual Masturbation Monday on October 2nd. Maybe we should celebrate it every year. That's not a bad idea.
And what's Masturbation Monday? What is Masturbation Monday?
Well, Masturbation Monday is an episode all about masturbation. And guess what? We're going to give it a new name today.
Yep. We're calling it self-pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Where did you learn that?
I'm not sure exactly where I learned it, but I would say it became part of my vernacular certainly in the past 5 years. So I don't know. It's probably been around for a lot longer than that, but that's when I was first introduced to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just love it for some reason. Like there's certain words, like being literary, there's certain words that I love to say, and I'm attracted to how they're spelled or whatever. And there's certain words I don't. And like masturbation, I hate that word. Like,
oh yeah?
Yeah. Self-pleasure is so much better.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone misspells masturbation constantly. BTW. They're always putting an E in there instead of a U. So yes, we want to say first, we're calling it self-pleasure. And we believe that self-pleasuring is natural and healthy. Just to let you know, there's nothing wrong with it. It helps us understand our own bodies. It's good for us. We are sexual beings, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yes. And everything that Andrea just said is not what we were taught growing up. That is the stance that we have right now as we're having this episode and talking about it with our brave hearts. Yeah, that we are definitely very pro self-pleasure.
Yeah. And today we're going to talk about our initial impressions of masturbation growing up, how our relationship to it has changed, how often we do it, how we do it, the tools we use when we do it, and some funny experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. And also the judgment and shame that we had growing up around it.
Yeah. And so let's just dive into that. I wouldn't say that I had judgment and shame. I don't think anyone said that to me. I don't think I read it anywhere. It just, when I realized what I was doing, I was like, oh, this can't be okay. Right. Because it felt sexual.
Okay, but
I was young.
So paint me more of a picture. How old were you? And you just started touching yourself and you just didn't feel good, or it felt good? Like,
so, yeah, I mean, I would say my mom never spoke about it to me. And I remember going through a period and thinking, why didn't she tell me about this? But then, and I think I even asked her at some point and she's like, well, how was I supposed to bring that up? You know, like, what was I supposed to say about that? And I get it. It's uncomfortable. Because she did talk to me about sex and was very pro education on that. But there's something just a little more intimate, I think, about it that, yeah.
But you were also raised Catholic.
Yeah, I was raised Catholic. But I don't think I was ever told it was wrong. It just wasn't talked about.
Okay.
Not for my brothers, not for me. It was not discussed.
Mm-hmm.
And I must have seen a little bit of it in pop culture. But I don't really remember how I stumbled upon it, literally, with my fingers. But I did. And then I remember doing it and thinking, oh, that feels good. And then, thank God, I had this big, thick Judy Blume Q&A book, which, by the way, you can't even find now. Like, I've looked it up and tried to find like the exact book. Because, of course, I read the Judy Blume fiction books. But I had this Q&A book, and I just remember like this place where I kept it in my closet. And And I read it and I was just so fucking relieved that I was not a bad person.
So
there was a Q&A saying like, oh, is it okay to touch myself? What's this called? Like, it's totally natural. It just gave me a little 101 on masturbation. And I was like, okay, it's okay. Like, it's okay that I'm doing this.
Wow. Okay. How old were you, do you think, when this general recognition?
No, like 12 to 14, I guess.
Okay.
Probably. Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay.
And I did have this friend that I don't want to out in any way, but that in my neighborhood that we realized that we both knew about this. And so we would do it with a pillow or something. But we both knew that it was possible, not with each other, but we both knew that it felt wrong.
What were you doing with the pillow?
Like we're humping the pillow.
Oh, you're humping the pillow. Okay.
With our clothes on.
Okay.
Right? And like getting some kind of pleasure from that.
Right.
And I remember though, like us thinking, I don't know if we said it out loud or if we both knew like that we shouldn't be caught doing this.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was some kind of guilt or shame about it. Maybe because I was only 13 and I wasn't supposed to be having sex. And that was, for.
Did you associate this feeling to sex?
Well, the place where you do it is where the penis goes in. So
right. So at that point, you already knew where the penis went in.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Okay. I knew enough about sex, but I was not doing it. I wasn't doing anything but kissing and holding hands.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. And then I remember reading V.C. Andrews. Did you read V.C. Andrews? Have we talked about this?
No.
I can't believe it. So V.C. Andrews, like Flowers in the Attic. You know what I'm talking about? So really popular, thick fiction book. It's a whole series of them. Flowers in the Attic was the first one. And everybody my age was reading them. My mom, like, she knew I was reading and she was so happy I was reading and she wasn't a reader. So if she had read this book, she would have been like, you can't read this. So it was just this like kind of horror novel, but there was this twisted sex like woven into it. And we all, like so many people my age are like, oh yeah, I learned about sex from V.C. Andrews. Like that's who taught us about sex.
Wow.
So there's a little mention of masturbation in there too. And then when I got wind of this, I was like, oh. So then I went to the library, my local library where I got all my books. And I had this amazing, wonderful woman, Jan, who was the librarian. She wore these like brown pantsuits and she would sit behind this big desk. It was this library that's like the size of this room. And I lived in this tiny town. And, she would like curate books for me and I would be looking for certain books. I remember she introduced me to Bridges of Madison County. It was so amazing. But then like I realized that these horror novels had really good sex scenes in them. And so then I would check those out and she was like, oh, so clear that she was disapproving of these books that I was taking out, but whatever. She couldn't say anything. So yeah, then those became my prompts, right? My things to read to self-pleasure.
Oh, I'm so fascinated by this. I'm loving listening to you right now.
So there was I guess there's a few steps to it. And then I eventually, when computers came out and the internet, then I would print out stories to read because that seemed safer than watching things. And plus there wasn't YouTube back then and, YouPorn and all that. So
what I'm hearing you say is that you would like found stories, you'd print them out, you read them, and then that was part of like the fantasy turn on, and then you would masturbate to what you were reading.
Right. But then I didn't do that till college, really. Like, because that wasn't something I could have done at home, like printing out. And we had, barely had a computer at home at that time. It just wasn't a thing. So the other part to this is that, do you know what Big Mouth is?
No.
Janelle. So it's a TV series. It's animated, but it's all about puberty. So it's about like 6 kids in junior high and it's all.
Is it on right now?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's streaming on Netflix. Okay. And so someone sent me a clip and it is the funniest fucking thing. It's all about like a girl who's 13 meeting her vagina, right? And her vagina is like, hi, hey girl, hey, how are you? And she introduces herself to her and she's like, you want to play sometime? Like,
oh my God.
Can you imagine having this when we were 13, right? So it is hilarious. And it's Kristen Wiig is the voice behind the vagina.
So that's a resource for everyone.
It is a resource, definitely. You should go check out the clip regardless. So Anyway, I am glad that Big Mouth is out there educating our teenagers about.
So does your daughter watch it?
She has seen it. Yes. And it was a little, I was like, should I let her watch that? And I did. Some friends in her class were when we were in Costa Rica. And she was like, I was like, like it's kind of raunchy. And I wasn't sure if that was the right. She's like, Mom, she's like, all the guys are talking about that shit anyway at school. She's like, it's better that I'm getting it and I'm understanding it and it's funny and it pokes fun at it and I'm learning.
Like your daughter's freaking amazing.
I mean, yeah, she's just like, it's true. And I don't blame, I'm like glad she has the education.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Okay. So Janelle, what about your story?
I like taking a step back.
Just breathe.
To take in everything on your end. So I grew up Catholic, no conversations about masturbation, none, zero, nothing. And I do remember learning about sex from a friend, like a family friend. And I'm mentioning that because I don't know how old I was, but I remember I was probably like 10-ish. I'm going to say 10-ish. And I remember learning about this like penis in the vagina thing. And then like finding out from her and then my brother, who was a year younger, telling him, and he's like, that's not true. And like, I remember having like that conversation. And then I was like, something about like a baby comes out and like, so, but there was that piece. And it wasn't until like senior year, maybe junior year in high school, that my mom had a conversation with me about sex, which was, we would recommend waiting till marriage.
Okay. Abstinence all the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And although like, we'll love you if you don't, but we recommend it if you do.
Great.
But I don't have any recollection, zero recollection of a self-pleasure conversation or masturbation conversation. And the reason probably why is I remember reading, I remember exactly where I was. I was out at my aunt and uncle's house in Amagansett, which is on the east end of Long Island. I was sitting on their couch in the living room and their Cosmo was on. All my cousins were older than me. I had 3 girls. And so I was between 10 and 12. And I was a voracious reader. So interestingly, as you're saying V.C. Andrews and all of that, I'm like, I jumped to Danielle Steele.
Was there sex in there?
There was sex in there, but it was I don't know if the V.C. Andrews was it teenagers?
It wasn't for young adults, really.
Okay. So anyway,
Danielle Steele.
So I was reading Danielle Steele, but I remember reading this Cosmo article, which was, now I don't remember the title, of course, but something about how to have an orgasm or like best orgasm tips ever, like whatever it said, right?
Cosmo clickbait of the time. Cosmo was all about sex. It seemed like from the front.
And I remember reading that. And I remember like us being like, oh, I'm going to go try this. So I went and tried it. It didn't work. Like AKA, like I was like reading this article, trying to figure out what it meant and trying to do it. Mm-hmm. Feeling like it didn't work, and then feeling like I was broken.
Ugh.
And I didn't try again for a decade.
And then you tried again.
Tried it again when I was a senior in college.
Okay.
And I just assumed I was the woman who couldn't orgasm.
Was it a big deal? Were you hearing about it from everyone else and was like, okay.
I think I definitely was. I was surrounded by girls. I was playing volleyball. I was an athlete.
Yeah.
And so I think I just said, no, I've tried it. It doesn't work. Like, I can't do it. I can't orgasm. And so I was just like matter of fact, like this article, like just like shut me down totally. And I have a vague recollection of reading Judy Blume, but I don't this Q&A book. I don't have any recollection of anything giving me tips, tools, normalization, conversation about self-pleasure. And even though we spoke a lot about sex in my volleyball teams and such, I don't have any recollection of conversations maybe they did talk about self-pleasure, but I was just like, no, I'm broken. I can't do it. Like, it doesn't work for me. So I started having sex like at 17, was having sex through college. I think this is when I got good at faking orgasm.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, me too. Yeah.
And
funny that. Yeah, we haven't even talked about that. Yeah.
Right. And then I also then now remember another conversation with some groups of friends, a group of girlfriends, my senior year, who, when I told them that I couldn't orgasm, but that I also didn't masturbate, they were like, what? And I was like, yeah, but I haven't tried since I was 12. They were like, okay, no, this is what you need to do. And they told me what to do. They told me to go home, to like find something to look at, to like just relax, like give myself space. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I did. I went home. I remember having this art book by Gustav Klimt. I still have it actually somewhere.
Love it.
And it was Gustav Klimt is the one whose art painting is The Kiss, is one of his really famous ones. Yeah. But he has this sketchbook or this art book with all of his sketches, pencil drawings of women masturbating. Interestingly.
That's so random. I don't think I've seen those. Right?
Why I had that book anyway? It's fascinating in and of itself. But I did. And so I just like remember like looking at that and then orgasming.
Okay. Then you figured it out.
And I figured it out. And at that moment, I then became like a kid in the candy store because I was 21 and I now knew this sensation and feeling in my body. And I was a senior in college. And I remember I would like literally like run home after classes in the afternoon so that I could masturbate. Not sneak it in. I was just like, oh no, okay, I've got time. I've got a free hour. I'm going to run home and masturbate. And so that was like my early 20s, obviously. And then I was like off to the races. I don't remember when I brought it into sex where I was self-pleasuring while I was having sex, but like I was just so excited. So on a plane, in the car, while I was driving, like really anywhere I could, I was orgasming.
Yeah.
And self-pleasuring. Yeah.
Okay. So I hear you started late, but then, you made up for it, right?
I did my best.
Made up for last time.
Yeah. But so just in a way, like the judgment and the shame was not for me, at least the way that it feels in my body now, is it wasn't about that masturbation is bad. It was that I can't do it. Something is wrong with me.
Right. Right. So it's a different kind of shame
yeah.
It's interesting how taboo this is. Like I feel free talking about it, but I'm getting this wave of like, oh my gosh, who's listening to this? I'm just getting this like, whoa, a little anxiety come up as I shared my whole story and then listening to your whole story. And I'm like, it's deep, this sort of thing. And we're just like, oh, you're not supposed to do that.
Right. Talk about it even?
Yeah. You're not supposed to talk about it. Maybe that's it.
And yet I really, like, I'm just like listening to you, knowing that you're already talking about it with your daughter is so, I feel my heart open of like, oh my gosh, it's like every girl who knows that it's okay, that it's healthy, that it's normal, that it's okay, that she's not broken if she can, she's not broken if she can't. It's like all of that feels to me like it just feels really, 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 really good. And I'm so happy for your daughter. So we've talked about our early 20s. Actually, maybe why don't we even stay with our early 20s? And maybe and stick with like vibrators and like, how are we doing it?
Okay. Yeah, good idea. So I got my first vibrator in my early 20s when I went to visit my cousin in California. She had a friend and we hooked up and he was like, you don't have a vibrator? You need a vibrator. And he went and bought one for me, which was bizarre, right? And I still have the same vibrator.
Wow.
Because I never went and got a different one because I'm just not really a vibrator girl, I guess. It's so popular now. They have such fancy ones. But he basically kind of taught me to use it. And he was a really nice guy. And I'm like, oh, that's so weird. I know. But yeah, it felt like this great safe space to like understand it and learn it. So everyone talks about the fancy ones now. I just use my finger. I often, if I take a gummy, I'm going to get a little more ravenous and into it, I find porn very helpful. I have my keywords and I look that up and it really works for me. And it has for a long time. I wouldn't say I do it that often now. It's like my relationship was quite different because I was into it in my 20s, then didn't do it, I would say through most of my 30s. It was pretty occasional. And then I've started back up probably in the last 10 years. But even so, yeah, I don't self-pleasure that much. I go through phases. And that's it. I think it's totally okay to do anytime as much as you want, but I'm not drawn to it that much. I guess it depends on how much sex you're getting as well.
Yeah. Although interestingly, I feel I have like a inverse relationship to that. I feel that I self-pleasure the more sex I'm having. Yeah, my sexual erotic energy is active. And so then it's like, oh, like I versus feeling dormant. I've gone for long periods of time without having sex. And so I think that particular energy has gone dormant.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think that's true. Like it's a little bit of the more you do it, the more you're aware of it, the more it's open.
Right. And you're aware of it. I think it's actually moving an energy. Like there's a feeling like almost like a current going through your body that, for me anyway, where even if I'm not in that exact moment, self-pleasuring, it's like turning something on, right? And then that stays on.
Do you have a vibrator that you use all the time? Or like, what do you use? What tools do you use?
I've spent a lot of my life in large groups of women because I was an athlete of a team sport. I played volleyball in high school and college. And then I worked in a lingerie store where it was all women working. So I have been in like essentially communities of women where that's who's I'm around all the time.
Female estrogen.
Yeah. Female estrogen. When I was in my 20s, the women who I was working with were all in their 20s. We were working in the lingerie store. We had a lot of things to say. And I remember it was not a rite of passage at all, but yet it was something that we would get really excited about every now and again when someone new would start working with us and figure out that they didn't have a vibrator. And you'd be like, okay, here's the latest vibrator. And like, it would be like almost like an excursion to Fascinations, which is a really great sex store here in Denver. And I think in my case, like I had never been to the sex store. So there's like, oh my God, you have to go, you have to try it out. You have to try out the rabbit, right? The Sex in the City, that whole thing.
Yeah, that was all about the rabbit.
And so this was in a collective, like this was not me. Oh, I'm like furtively trying to figure this out. This was like a group of 10 women all like exclaiming with excitement about their favorite sex toys and vibrators and where to shop and what to do. And that was the environment that I was in. And so if someone found out about a new vibrator, then like all of us would be getting a new vibrator. So I had a whole plethora of choices. I'm also someone who was always curious. So in when I was in relationships, depending on the relationship, sometimes it'd be like, okay, like let's take a look at the sex toys and see what's there.
Yeah.
And so yes, so I have definitely explored lots of vibrators, and for the most part, my hands are always like my go-to. But I have figured out that erotic writing, whether I'm reading it or listening to it, is a turn on. Dipsy is an app that I've downloaded, which is erotic stories for women. There's alternative orientations and genders and races, and I like that. I've never gotten into porn, and I've actually tried to. The closest I came was looking up amateur porn. So that it's like real people just like posting videos of themselves. And because then it felt at least genuine. But what I have realized at this moment is that watching, even whether it's real people, like in a sex club situation or porn, is that it really puts me in my head. I don't say in my body. So that's not a turn on for me to be watching other people doing things. Yeah.
Even that is like watching someone else, not for you. If it's porn, if it's real.
Yeah. As long as if I don't think if I like in porn, what's the challenge for me is that I go into my head of like, does this person want to be doing that? So that then becomes a turn off.
Right.
If I'm in a room with other people having sex who I know want to be having sex and are clearly enjoying having sex and they're there and it's all good, then that to me isn't a turn off, but it's not necessarily a turn on either.
Okay. So I think in marriage, it seems like I was somehow given the idea or the stigma that if I'm self-pleasuring and my husband catches me doing that as if I'm doing that instead of having sex with him. Right. And so it's not cool. Like, if you need to do that, why can't you do it with me? And I don't feel that way. Like, I think it's fine. Like, I can self-pleasure when I want, and it doesn't really necessarily have to have bearing on my sex life with a partner.
I would say for me, the term I understand that to be is, there's a term called parallel play, which is when two people are basically self-pleasuring next to each other. And I would say that is something that I did in my relationship for a period of time and was really the only way that was working. But then I also recognize that I did hide how often I was self-pleasuring from my partner because I was so sad that we were not being intimate.
Yeah. And so you think in that way your relationship to self-pleasuring changed because it became more of a secret?
I don't know that it changed. I think it probably always was, in a way, a secret. It's only now that I think that I'm really embracing my sexuality in all its forms and like I'm really grounded in my pleasure that it's not. I don't think that even though I wasn't, I always felt like it was appropriate. There's nothing wrong with me for doing it, but there was something about getting my needs met and somehow not wanting him to feel bad about getting my needs met. Like something convoluted in that realm.
Right. Got it. So I think you have a pretty good story about self-pleasure from a friend of yours in her marriage.
My gosh.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear this.
I heard this. I have a couple that I'm friends with, and I actually interestingly heard about it from him first. They've been married, let's just say 20 years because they have teenage daughters. And that he was telling me that they met in their early 20s. They had started hanging out and, getting ready to have sex so I don't know, whatever date it was. And she brought him into the bedroom and said to him, okay, I know you think we're going to have sex, but we're not. What I'm going to do is I'm going to self-pleasure and you're going to watch me so you know what I like.
Oh my God. So awesome.
Like, unbelievable. So he's telling me the story and my mouth is on the floor. Then I got to talk to her about it afterwards. And to me, that was the most revolutionary, wow, you knew your body and were so confident in your body at that moment that you were able to say, here's what I want. And now you're going to have to learn how to do it to me. And that it also fills my heart up with joy to know that they have two young daughters that they're teaching the same kind of empowerment to around their bodies and their pleasure. But I still, I'm I've never heard of any woman doing that. And I'm just blown away by it.
It just makes so much sense, but it's not that profound of a concept. And yet, yeah, I'm wow, what a great idea.
Yes.
I'm just going to show you, you watch.
Yes.
This is do you see my finger? Here's what I'm doing with it. And because basically what we're doing is to so much of sex is, we're mind reading and we're following cues. We're following body cues. We're following verbal cues, but it's a lot of guessing.
Right. And it doesn't have to, I just came from a Wheel of Consent workshop with Betty Martin this past weekend. And that recognizing the cultural dysfunction of assuming that someone else, especially a guy, is supposed to read the mind of the woman about what she likes and doesn't like. Because she doesn't know what she likes. And so she just wants him to guess. And that is a downward spiral.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. So I know that we've both done some group self-pleasure practices.
Mm-hmm.
We've been at
What?
not together.
Yeah.
We
No,
weren't, we weren't at the same retreat, but
what? Yeah, but what are you talking about? I have never heard before I did it. Like, what is a group self pleasure practice? What could you possibly be talking about?
yeah.
And Bravehearts, I'm speaking for you in case you're like, wait, what? I thought self pleasure just happened, in the dark underneath my blanket of my bedroom, and that's when it happens.
Mm-hmm. I think since you've been through this maybe more times than me, I mean, I remember it. It's a little blurry, to be honest, but it's a really big room with a lot of mattresses and a lot of people and a lot of nakedness. Mm-hmm. And you're all lying there self-pleasuring.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. We'll just pause. Did you hear that?
Did you hear that, Bravehearts? I have done this. Yeah. Actually, almost more times than I can count. I have done it many times.
I'm not surprised. Yeah, I've done it once.
I've done it.
You're very experienced.
And just realizing, there's so much emotion that comes up, and there's like in this setting, but there is a recognition of why would you do that? And I would say for me, that part of the why is to normalize it. Mm-hmm. And I've done it with all women in the room. I've also done it in a co-ed experience, and that pleasure is okay. That pleasure is more than okay. Mm-hmm. That it is sacred, that it is divine, and it is not something that has to be hidden. Mm-hmm. And self-pleasuring does not have to be like kept in the corner.
That's mic drop. Like that's huge. Mm-hmm. That really is. So what was your experience like self-pleasuring in a room full of people?
So the first time I remember, I actually don't think that I orgasmed, and because I was like really nervous, mm-hmm. and there was a lot of noise, and there was some comparison in my mind of like, oh my gosh, like that person sounds like this, and that like, mm-hmm. oh my gosh, they're really enjoying that. And like really being in my body, but like forcing myself to relax in my body, like, resulted in me moving forward at an edge. Like I was like, oh, okay, I just did this. And this is like in general, like the self-pleasure practice doesn't actually have to be about the orgasm itself either. It's about just letting yourself feel pleasure without it having an outcome to it as well.
True that. We can get into different kinds of orgasms and what an amazing concept that I've really only touched on in the last 5 or 6 years of just touching, feeling so good. I don't even need to come. Mm-hmm. Like that's such a revolutionary topic. At least it was for me at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So each time I've done it, like there's just been a little bit more relaxation. Like now I know what to expect. Oh, okay. And then the energy of the room and the people. And so it just feels more, I get more and more into my body essentially each time I do it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. And my experience with that, I don't remember if I orgasmed or not, but funny thing about me is that I'm constantly disappointed that no one is filming my life. Right? I don't know if I've ever told you that before, but so people witnessing me while I'm self-pleasuring, that I loved it. Like there was nothing uncomfortable about it to me at all. Like,
and is it worth saying that in the room of self-pleasuring, my understanding is that you're actually not watching others.
You're not
as much as you're listening. You can hear others, but that you're really in your own experience.
And you are. And just in general, though, it's just like, people weren't standing and watching me.
Right.
But I think the power of the collective for me is strong.
Yeah.
And being that open and that free and that expressive and that like I was given permission to do it in anywhere I want in this huge room in public. And for me, that was an adrenaline rush in itself. And so that's why I don't remember if I orgasmed.
Right. It was his own thing. The other thing I just want to kind of tie back to, because I don't think I've said this so far, is that I would say that the main way I orgasm in sex is by self-pleasuring.
So okay. During like.
Yeah. So I know. So I fortunately broke the habit of faking my orgasms about 10 years ago.
Mhm.
And it just started to embrace that, oh, the way that I'm going to orgasm doesn't matter who I'm with for the most part, is going to be if I'm also self-pleasuring, whether they're inside me, whatever, like whatever's happening.
Got it.
And while there's some nuance, and that's changing a little bit now, as my body is changing,
Mhm.
that sex and self-pleasure go hand in hand for me.
Great. Yeah. Whatever combination works.
Yeah.
You know, and we can always help. We can help our partners, you know, in the midst. Great. Do you want to talk about de-armoring?
Yeah, I've spoken about this in the Butt Plugs and Tantrikas episode, which is that, so it was just about a year ago now, a little bit over, that I experimented with putting things inside me, aka vibrators, crystal wands, and then a clit sucker. And what I realized is I had a lot of stuck energy inside my womb.
Mm-hmm.
And when I put all of those things, not simultaneously, inside of me, in the butt plug, that a whole bunch of energy released. And that energy released in the form of tears, vibration, screaming, lots of different ways. And then after that experience, I realized this is why it's called the de-armoring, is that it like moved a lot of like the sludge and the stuck energy that I feel like I had in my system from lived experience of shame, from Catholic beliefs, from ancestral stuff. And that as a result of that, I feel so much more now. So this is why my orgasms are changing. How I can have an orgasm is changing. That I can also like feel like a vibration throughout my whole body in a way that I couldn't before. That it feels to me, the relationship to self-pleasure is that I can just feel more pleasure now when I'm touching myself or being touched. And so I just want to acknowledge for some people that if you have sort of the experience that I did of like, oh, like I can't do this, or maybe it doesn't feel great or whatever, is that it's possible that you're just numb in that whole area.
Great thing to point out. So, and I'm hearing that the self-pleasure, self-healing goes hand in hand. Wow.
For me.
So are you the source of your own pleasure?
I am. And we've talked about this. And I remember in that podcast, you're like, I'm not sure if I am. So I'm wondering if you've thought about that anymore since then and how you feel about it.
I had this conversation with a friend of mine maybe 6 years ago. And she told me that when she orgasms, she feels more like herself, closer to herself. And I can remember her saying this to me in her living room and me being like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I didn't get it. She's always been a sexual being, always teaching me things about sex since her 20s. So this confused me at the time, but it certainly relates to what you're saying. So it's all a release and it's from within. And when I cry, when I sob, when I emote, when I come, I am releasing energy. And I have only in the last few years come to understand what she means. Like that I do feel closer to myself or more like myself. It's hard to describe, but it is definitely an internal feeling. And you mentioned to me that I am the source of my own pleasure and that the different partners I might have are just different flavors of that pleasure. And I recently self-pleasured and had a really amazing orgasm and was like, wow, I can't believe I did that myself. So yes, I think I was definitely like WTF. So I think I am the source of my own pleasure, but it's pretty hard habit or idea to break that I want to be feeling that pleasure with someone else present because I'm so accustomed to that.
I hear that. And I don't think when I'm saying I'm the source of my own pleasure, that I'm saying that means I don't need anyone or want anyone else around me.
I think I'm still exploring. Like I'm ready to accept that I'm the source of my own pleasure, but there is a little fight inside that's saying, yes, and yeah, and they really want this flavor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's a journey for sure. And if we can all love ourselves enough and become obsessed with ourselves, and feed ourselves rather than waiting for someone else to feed us, waiting for someone else to bring us flowers. Remember that poem? Planting our own garden. The more we do that, then the more we can consider ourselves the source of our pleasure.
Mm-hmm. I think the way that I'll add to that for myself now, as I've been having more sex lately, is recognizing, if I don't orgasm while having sex, it's because I chose not to. Because I know how to make myself orgasm. And so either I can do it through my own touch or I can be communicating it to that person. But if it's not happening, it's not because they're not doing it to me. It's because I'm not doing it to myself.
You're taking responsibility for the orgasm.
Yes. So I think that's maybe another way to say, like, I'm the source of my own pleasure, right? I can tell them what to do. They might know me well enough to know what to do, but either way, it has come through me what it looks like.
What's occurring to me as we talk about this too is that there's also a linguistical hurdle to overcome, because how do we talk about it? He gave me an orgasm or he didn't give me an orgasm. Like it's something he handed out or a partner handed out. And so we think of it that we're getting it from somewhere else. And so that's sort of ground into me. And so this idea of like, oh no, I don't, I'm getting it from myself is still pretty novel.
Right.
So remember Bravehearts, there's no wrong way to self-pleasure. There's no wrong way to do this. What feels good to you? What feels good to your body?
How often you want to do it? There's no, like, you can't do it too much. You can't do it too little.
There are no rules.
Right. This is about you and your relationship to your body. And I think I would actually say this is that I do think it's beneficial to do it.
What's the direct benefit?
Is that I think it activates your life force energy. And activating life force energy is a creative energy, the pleasure energy. It makes us feel more alive.
Beautiful. We give you permission to self-pleasure and to play.
Yay!
Play with yourself.
Welcome to Masturbation Monday.
Thanks, Bravehearts. Check us out on Instagram and permissiontobehuman.live. Ciao for now.
Do you need permission to be human? You got it. Listen, subscribe, and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more about us at permissiontobehuman.live.